Hello and welcome to the Climbing Arborist podcast. Yeah, I know what you might be thinking. I thought it was the Talking Trees podcast, and you'll be right in thinking that. But I decided to change the name because it just kind of makes sense for consistency. The website's climbingarborist.com, the social media's Climbing Arborist. I don't know why I decided to call it Talking Trees in the first place. So, silly me, I suppose. Anyway, today we've got an awesome episode of the Climbing Arborist podcast. Had a guest who is very interesting guy, fantastic, has done fantastic things for the industry, brought some awesome products to the industry that I imagine a lot of you guys out there listening will be using on a daily basis. And that is Mark Bridge, who makes up 1/3 of the Tremagineers, as well as Chris Cowell and Bettis Strasser. I hope I'm saying his name right, Bettis. Anyway, yeah, it was awesome chat having Mark on the podcast, and we had a good, well over 2-hour chat. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. But before we get into the podcast, I'd just like to say that this podcast is sponsored by Wesper Tree Equipment. Really happy that Wesper got on board and wanted to support the podcast by sponsoring it. So thank you very much, Wesper. They are a arborist supply company based in the US. They're an awesome company, and I'm lucky enough to live fairly close to Wesper. They're just over the border in Bellingham, which is in the Pacific Northwest. So I get to go into the shop personally and meet all the guys and just have a good old natter, and they are awesome. I know that they have a huge range of equipment there. They have it's a really big online store they have, but they really try and keep it like a small town feel. When you go in, you get amazing customer service. They obviously have nice guy Dave, who is just a wealth of knowledge on all equipment, knows everything about rope that there's worth knowing about rope, and he's pretty much used all the equipment that they sell in Wesper. So if you need any advice, any recommendations, that kind of thing, then nice guy Dave is your man to ask. And all the staff there are just so friendly. So yeah, Wesper themselves say that the arb industry is all about the people. So they really want to be the number one arb supplier to you guys, and that's why they really want to treat you right, give you the best customer service possible, and in turn that's going to keep you coming back. So great business model, and that's why they're always so happy to help you, happy to give you the right advice, or happy to pass you on to nice guy Dave if you need some technical advice. So thanks Wesper for sponsoring the podcast. So Wesper Tree Equipment in the US. If you want to go to the website, use the URL wesper.com /pod POD. So use that URL, and they'll know you've come from the podcast, and use the promo code POD, and you'll receive 10% off your first order with that promo code. So yeah, once again, that's wesper.com /pod with the promo code at checkout POD. Hope you really enjoy the podcast. Thanks very much, and thank you again to Mark Bridge. What an awesome conversation. Enjoy. Right, thanks a lot for joining us, Mark. Pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been personally an admirer of yours for quite some time. I'm sure most of the people that get into the industry have heard your name, either be it through like the Tremagineers or the ETCC climbing competitions and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to, get a chance to talk with you and hear about where you came from and how you kind of carved your path along the way, and why you made the choices that you did, and that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Dan. I've obviously been a bit aware of what you've been doing, and yeah, I'm interested to see where our conversation leads us.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, there's plenty to talk about with you doing Treemagineers and the ETCC and all the seminars that you kind of are part of and the training courses that you run. But the best place to start is kind of at the beginning, and how you got into the industry, and if this was kind of what you knew you wanted to do when you left school, or if you did other jobs and then kind of stumbled across it. So yeah, how did you start?
Well, I could give you some long-winded spiel about how this has always been what I wanted to do, which would be a downright lie. I was dazed and confused, and I had a mate who was an arborist at that time in Basel, where I live, and he asked me whether I'd be keen to tag along, and I was like, yeah, whatever. That's it.
All right, really. And how old were you at that point?
19. Well, I had been doing holiday jobs with him before, so it was just it's just coincidence, really.
Yeah.
But I do think it suited me in the sense that there's I think the physicality of it suited me. I say I was dazed and confused. I think part of that was just a mismatch between physical and mental energies, and I think that that tree care offers an outlet for that, or can have a balancing effect.
Yeah. So you live in Switzerland at the moment. What age did you grow up in the UK?
No, I grew up in Switzerland.
Oh, right.
Just
Okay.
with both cultures, so I was backwards and forwards. I had family, or I still have family in the UK, but I moved over with my parents when I was small.
Oh, okay. So once you did started and kind of worked with your friend, did you just know straight away, like, this seems like quite a lot of fun, and I like being outdoors, and I like doing something physical? And
Well, I think what I would credit Alan for, which frustratingly I've never really managed to do, was he had very much that sort of that approach where you're on the ground, basically. You're on the ground and you watch for a long time. It felt like a long time. It was probably just the first half year that I was mainly doing groundwork, learning from the ground, literally from the bottom up. And when I did get opportunities to do something, I was just all fired up to prove to the guys that I was up for the job. So that's a good question. I do think no, I think it was something that from the beginning on felt it worked for me. But I think it was 3 or 4 years down the road that I became really passionate about it. Because I was involved in other stuff before then as well. That was also that I was interested in. So that focus evolved, I'd say, evolved over the first 5 years, I'd say.
yeah. And did you so people will kind of know you more, I suppose, from the equipment point of view, with doing the Treemagineers and developing products and stuff. But did you, so kind of in the early years, did you become fascinated by the climbing aspect and kind of the competition aspect and that kind of thing, or did it kind of grow together with the love of trees and learning about trees and kind of biology and correct tree care, or did you focus more on, you enjoyed like the climbing part, or did it kind of work together?
Okay, well, easy part of the question first. The competitions were fairly far down the road at that point in time. I started in tree work in 1990, and the first competition I went to was in 98.
Okay.
So that's somewhat out of the equation. I think every person has their own focus, who's involved in tree care, has their area of core competence.
Yeah, what they're kind of naturally drawn to. Just yeah.
Exactly. I'm not, for me, the whole tree biology kind of thing is not my area of key competence. It is something I'm aware about and want to have a working knowledge of. I've got my go-to people, and I have immense respect for. I was just listening to Anthony Ambrose talking in Rochester at an event I was at last week, who's from the University of Berkeley, who does work with the redwoods, and they're just extraordinary beings, trees. So yeah, I'm aware of that and I'm interested in it. But this is a long-winded answer, I realise. I'm sorry, but
No, we got all the time.
it's not. I would not consider myself to be. That's not my thing, as it were.
Yeah.
The equipment side of things, I was always interested in. But in 1990, I started out on nylon twisted 3-ply lines with the spliced Prusik loops. So it's English school. Alan was climbing a Willans harness, those orange harnesses. I started off on a basic Comet harness. So these were definitely early days, and it was only by and by that new equipment started to come in. The Comet designs, the Vert, the Evolution, the Butterfly. These were all really big deals because this was obviously pre-internet, and information was just so hard to come by.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt a bit like a thirsty man lost in the middle of a desert, when it came to information. And it was only actually at the first comps, or just pre-first comps, that I became aware that there was actually a lot of other people also doing this work outside of a very small circle of people. So to me, those early years were they were quite isolated in many ways, and I do credit Alan Lyons, whom I trained with, but also Dave McIntyre, who was from Scotland, who was working with us then. They were definitely my mentors, and Dave was just a very inspiring climber to watch. Just somebody who intuitively, he was just very talented. Watching him climb was something that sort of ignited a spark for me.
And so the guys that you worked with, did you work with like quite a large company, or was it just you and mainly these two guys? And
yeah, two people, and Dave would come in and join us. And Serge, my business partner today, started in '92, so we were a 4-man crew.
Oh, nice. So you must have felt pretty lucky that you kind of just got in with people that were knowledgeable and good at what they did straight away, really, as like mentors. And
yeah, but I think that's always the case, isn't it, Dan? I mean, you are what you are, but you're also shaped by the people you have around you.
yeah.
Sometimes you just get lucky. You just fall in with a good crew, and they'll have an influence on what you can. They'll foster potential.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've tried to do since then, is where I do have the opportunity to foster competence, or to encourage competence, nurture competence where I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the harnesses that kind of were around when you first started, because I started I came out of college thinking like 2000, so that's kind of when my career started, and I started with the exact same equipment as you were talking about in like in the early 90s, and so it's kind of like I started, but I was almost introduced to this equipment that was like already 10 years old, and so I kind of started in the same place, but like 10 years later, um, and yeah, the reason I asked about the guys that you worked with, like the mentors, is because I found that I started with a company that I basically was the only person that knew how to climb apart from the boss, like the guy I worked with, and he wanted to kind of take a step back, so he wanted somebody to come in who kind of had the skills, even though I had very like limited skills because I was just out of college. So I wasn't really learning from anybody else. I was almost like self-teaching, apart from when he would turn up on the jobs and kind of give me a bit of advice. So I feel, even although I got to climb every day because I was like the only guy to climb, it wasn't a quick learning curve. It was very steady because I didn't have somebody kind of show me all these different techniques all the time, and I was just kind of knew what I'd been taught in college, and that's what I stuck to because I didn't want to veer too far from what I'd been taught, kind of thing.
Yeah, that does sound familiar, and I think then that's down to what ground rules you've been equipped with. Were you given a reasonable foundation to base decision to making upon, and you'll probably survive it, or not, and you may be putting yourself at considerable risk. I mean, in hindsight, actually, there's not so much stuff I cringe about in hindsight. I think that was pretty solid. And there's funny things that spring to mind, which is pre cambium false crotch days. Alan had a policy in the company that we would use round slings as anchor points. And if you had an old carabiner with a gammy gate, with a gate where the mechanism was broken, we just put it up at the anchor point, just because there's always two carabiners up there.
Yeah,
that's where all carabiners went, up at the anchor point. Where in hindsight, I'm like, well, I'm not sure if that's such a good idea, but yeah, there's two up there. So,
yeah, let's do it. That's fine.
what can go
So
wrong?
how quickly kind of did you develop once you said, like, for the kind of the first 6 months to a year you were just on the ground, you were kind of just watching what everybody else was doing. It's all like, I find becoming like a climber is never going to be a quick process, because there's so much to kind of learn, and a lot of it comes with experience and trial and error, not with like seriously bad situations, but just trialing kind of the positions that you get in and how to move around more efficiently and stuff. And so I'm always like, I'm always in admiration of people that seem to go from like zero, and then in 6 months they look like they've been climbing for like 3 years, because I feel like for most people it takes a good couple of 2 or 3 years to get even kind of slightly efficient at doing things.
Well, I'm not sure I entirely agree. I'm actually really grateful to have come into tree care when I did. So in 1990, obviously the times before that were interesting, because that was the time in which the Shigo's ideas were becoming established. It was the transition from tree surgery to new tree biology. But from the 90s onwards was this huge or this rapid development of climbing techniques. But there was a lull early to mid 90s, or early to late 90s, where the established climbing techniques it was pretty steady. Well, no, probably mid 90s, because that was when, from a European perspective at least, there was that influx of techniques from the US. So after the first European ISA Congress, there was that tour of a number of American climbers, Don Blair, Ken Palmer, Ken James, Bob Phillips, demonstrating rigging techniques, throw line, foot locking, all of that stuff was introduced to Europe in '94. And I guess that percolated into the climbing scene in different countries at different speed. I've just realised I've forgotten what your question was.
That's good. That's good.
I can link that up again. What was the question, Dan?
It was about how long it kind of took you to.
Okay, got it. I'm on
Yeah.
it. Thank you. So I think for me, actually, the fact that I spent 6 or 7 years just really steady climbing, being able to evolve my techniques with quite basic techniques, gave me a really good foundation to take off on after that with these new techniques. So, climbing with 2 Prosek loops and 2 ends of my line with a steel core flip line with a Beckett hitch on my side D, it was just solid. I spent my youth doing competitive swimming, and I think from a physique point of view, I was well equipped for the climbing. It was just something that suited. This body was suited to climbing, and there's not a lot of pre-damage, and I didn't do a lot of unreasonable things in those first 10 years that damaged my body to a point that I can't climb today anymore. Then in 97, 98, I guess it was 98, I got I ordered my first Safety Blue High V, which was just extraordinary. I was just like mind blown.
What was that from going on
Yeah.
like a 3-strand climbing line?
Multi-plat and nylon twisted 3-ply
Yeah.
to this 16-strand, cone mantle, low-bearing mantle construction was just with a Blake's hitch on it, and I was like, "This is extraordinary."
This is revolutionary. Yeah.
But completely, I mean, and that's really hard to communicate, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm saddened actually when I see people going from climbing on a taut line hitch and they transition straight through to climbing on an akimbo. I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole spectrum between those two that you're
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
going to experience.
Yeah.
But that's a subjective view. It may be different
Yeah.
for somebody else, but for me personally, in my evolution as a climber, I'm really glad to have been able to progress from,
I've
the
kind of covered all the bases.
the
Yeah.
Prosecks, gone to a Blake, gone to AVT, tried this different stuff, and to me that was just interesting in terms of having a foundation and understanding of where we are today. But as I say,
Yeah.
these are what I'm saying. It's opinion. It's not fact.
Yeah.
This
No.
is subjective
Yeah. I
experience.
am. So we'll talk about that for a second, because I'm similar to you in I left college being taught basic purely to climb on on a Prusik hitch, and so I was using a very simple system. Well, it wasn't like a closed system or anything, but it was just a Prusik loop. And it's strange, since I've lived in Canada, everybody that comes over from the UK, even now, well, a lot of people, it seems like the English are always climbing a Prusik, and it's very strange. But anyway, I was, until recently, I was kind of the opinion that when you're taught climbing, you should be taught these basic systems, and you should be taught like how to tie a closed system in case it gets you out of a sticky situation, and be kind of be taught the hard way, because then the progression of the industry. But then I had this conversation with a couple of friends of mine, and one of them brought up a really good point, and he was the exact opposite opinion of me. He was like, why would you want to teach somebody, especially when you're first learning, like the hardest way of climbing a tree? Because do you not feel like if you try something really hard, unless you have that personality where you love a challenge and you thrive off of it, it's going to kind of take away from the enjoyment of actually climbing the tree. And if it's their first time, surely you want to get them up in a tree and kind of get them to feel what it's like and to move about in the tree, and not really have to think too much about the climbing aspect, because there's so many easier systems that you could kind of help them go on. And then and then like over time, if they're interested in doing it, or pursuing it as a career, then introduce kind of those systems a little bit later down the line. And I thought that was a really good point, in as far as like bringing people into the industry and showing them that it's not as hard as it once used to be, like hip thrusting up trees and that kind of stuff. But I think it's because, like, so when you started, and then when I started, and then say people who started later down the line from us, we'll all have our perspectives because of what we went through, and we'll probably always feel like, oh, this is how you should learn because this is how I learned. And I feel like I've gone through my career using all these various different systems and kind of evolving as the industry evolves. But no matter where you start, everybody's going to have their own kind of start and ending point. And so I think we're definitely biased in how we started. And yeah, and where do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right. I don't think or talk in absolutes. As you're correct in saying, if I say, it's you start on a prusik, you could go further back. You could tie a taut line. You could have somebody tie their harness out of their rope and a 3-knot system, and we choose not to do that. The point you choose as a starting point is subjective and or random. But then again, when I'm training somebody, I actually don't want to make it as easy as possible. I don't want to make it easy. I want to make it safe.
Yeah.
And I think there's also another aspect, which is this is, after all, a tribal history. I do think these techniques are part of our heritage, and I think it's important to communicate at least a part of that heritage and not forget about it. And I believe footlocking, for instance, is part of that heritage. I think footlocking taught me all sorts of stuff. It teaches me, observing my body going through emotion. It teaches me to have faith in my ability to hold my own weight and to manage my own weight. It teaches me to pace my way up a tree, kind of thing. And that was, to me, those were life lessons. Now, in a training situation, when I'm training ascent systems, I'll have people try to footlock, and they'll go, "Oh, this is really hard. I can't be bothered. I want to go up on mechanicals," and then they switch to ascenders, and they're like, "This is kind of not that easy either." So, I do think it's not about ease. It's just about introducing somebody step by step. It's not as though they have to climb on these systems for years, but I think a month on a prusik has never hurt anybody, and then you can move them onto a blake. And I think having a progression, if you put somebody straight on the high end tools, they're not going to appreciate what they have.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but I do think, and I think everybody's entitled to doing it their way. To me, there's a certain logic to a progression, allowing for a progression.
I think that having used all those various systems, it kind of, it definitely develops you as a climber, and I think once you're climbing on what you feel now is like the most efficient and best system that you climb on, you've probably kind of tweaked it to your own style of climbing through all those experiences and knowledge of those previous systems that you've used. And if someone were to come like straight into the industry and go on to like, as you said, like the high end stuff, like whatever system they're to be using, maybe because they can't call on that experience of using those lesser systems, they maybe don't generate the the right kind of way to move around the tree because of they haven't learned that from previous systems. And it's hard to say how people will kind of progress in the future, but and what their learning curve will be like. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
Well, this is going to sound a bit hard-nosed or something, but I'm really interested in discussing these things, climbing related topics with people. Yeah, I'm all up for discussion on the condition that the person opposite you knows what they're talking about. And somebody just rocks up and has a very narrow experience, yet will defend that one position with a almost religious fever. I'm not interested in entering into discussion because it's almost as though we have no basis to have a discussion on. And surely I think it's like in any other walk of life, diversity is a good thing, and a diverse basis for your opinion is certainly not the worst thing to have. It also gives you options if things don't go exactly as planned. I think being able to tie a 3-knot system is essential. It's an essential skill as an arborist, because otherwise one day you'll be stuck up a tree without a second eye-to-eye sling, and you're not going to know how to traverse back across the canopy because you don't know how to use the other end of your line.
Yeah, but that's a really good example. But that's an example that because you can tie that system, so that then becomes a tool for like traversing back across the canopy, lowering yourself back in or whatever. But people that have not learned that system and have never used a technique like that to kind of to lower themselves back in or something, that may not even cross their mind because they've never learned the system, so therefore they can't even, in a sticky situation, they can't even come up with it as a solution because they haven't learned that in the first place.
Correct. And I don't say this I don't mean that to sound, I'm not value judging. As I say, as we said before, it is what it is. You're equipped with the knowledge that you have partly due to the people that you're surrounded with, and somebody who, I was lucky to be in an environment that allowed me to grow, and somebody else is in a different environment that's maybe more restrictive or just want to go out and be productive no matter how. So I think to me that's one of the motives for going out there and talking to people about the ways that they climb, about the way that they work, and just offering people pointers as how to maybe expand the vision of what climbing could be. It doesn't have to be the same sequence of movements over and over again. You could add one small thing in to improve, to make it safer or more ergonomic or whatever. And I think Treemagineers sometimes is viewed as being something that per se offers high-tech solutions. That's never been my vision or our vision of Treemagineers. I think what we've always been interested in identifying is appropriate solutions or fit-for-purpose solutions, which can be as simple as a ring-to-ring saver. It could be a technique fix, not even a tool. It could be a different way of looking at something, or all of the above.
Yeah. So before we get on to like Treemagineers, because I've got a whole load of questions there, but so back to your kind of your career progression. At what point did you how long did you work for the company that you started out with?
10 years.
10 years. And then what was the decision did you go off and start your own at that point, or?
Yeah, Alan decided he didn't want to grow, and he was always taken off with the vehicle with all the tools in it. So we were always left on the job site with no tools, and with crucial tools in the vehicle. And it just came. I mean, that's a bit flippant. I think the truth of the matter is just that he didn't want to grow the company, and we could see ways in which we felt the company could expand, and that's a natural cut-off point, I think, where a crew will, or where somebody who's grown in a company hits a sort of glass ceiling and is the point where you kind of start up your own thing. Having said that, Adam very generously kept on using us for many years afterwards, allowing us to to bridge those first couple of years that were lean in terms of our own contracts. So that stayed very friendly. And we started Baumpartner, the tree care company, in 2000. So coming up to 20 years now.
Nice. And for people that don't know, you started a company that's like how does it work exactly? It's like a kind of co-op partnership kind of a company.
Yeah, the idea was that well, I'm going back further still, but before I came into tree care, or that whole my youth and sort of early 20s was very much sort of part of that sort of alternative, autonomous punk scene. So I think that when we started Baumpartner, Serge and Lucas, myself, were all that was where we kind of came from. So I think we did take that whole sort of do-it-yourself ethos from that scene into this project, and also had a very egalitarian vision, which was everybody involved in the project gets paid the same amount of money. That our aim for the project is to allow people to grow rather than for us to get as rich as possible, as fast as possible. And just in brackets, if that's what we're aiming to do, don't get into tree care.
Yeah.
So that was where we started from. Over the years, that did evolve, and it just doesn't. And because one of the ideas initially was also that there'd be no specialization, that everybody could do everything. And over the years, we were just like, that's just not the way it works, And the fact is that some people are just putting in more work, and that work needs to be covered as well monetarily, and specialization happens automatically. So that just evolved. It changed a bit over time. Today, it's Serge and myself are left of the original constellation, and there's employees in the company, but they're pretty level hierarchies, and we're out on the tools. I'm out on the job. Serge is on the job all the time. And the guy's 58 and extraordinary. Still climbing every day. And I'm out when I'm here, which is sometimes when I'm here.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, it started off as a cooperative. It evolved into something slightly different, and today I'd just call it a sort of hybrid entity that is, it allows people a lot of possibility to grow and evolve their own projects within the company. And if you come up with a good idea, we'll give you the means to grow it, because things get stale otherwise, don't they?
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it must have. So you were all like really good friends before you started the company, because it's I think it's very rare that you could have like a business structure like that, like a co-op that would actually work, and you wouldn't have like big fallouts. Oh, I mean, you said at the beginning, if you're in this to make a lot of money, don't bother. But I find that in business generally, if friends go into business, it's like I can talk from my own experience. I went into a business with a friend of mine, and it just I think, I don't know, like you've got to have a really special relationship and a really tight understanding of what everybody's in there to do, and that everybody's in there to kind of pull their own weight or bring different skills to like complement each other. Because I found that it kind of always ended up being you were judging the other person, like, are they doing as much as I'm doing? Am I putting in like 50% more work than they are? And then how is it fair? And then it kind of gets these little thoughts in your head, and it just kind of runs away with you, especially if you're if you're in a good place and you're in a good mood, it's fine. But if you're kind of in a stressed out a bit, you're like, why am I putting all this effort in? And I think that's why partnerships generally, or like, or going into business with friends, just doesn't seem to work. So I'm pretty impressed that you've kind of made it work and you found a solution for it.
No, I agree. It's not straightforward. It's not as though there hadn't been conflict over the years on many levels. Then it's down to communication. Does that conflict become destructive, or can you resolve it in respectful fashions? I think one of the things that was helpful in this case was that that money wasn't part of the conflict. Was that we've always managed to just take a step back and go like, look, at the end of the day, it's only money. We can, what's the worst that can happen? The whole thing is debt free. We can walk away from it tomorrow, and it's not the end of the world. But that is a privileged thing to be able to say. Working in Switzerland, the people have the money to be able to afford tree work, and you're not constantly battling people to try and convince them of the value of the service you're providing. I mean, there is that as well. Sometimes more than others, but by and large, it's a place where you can sell tree work at an appropriate price. So that is helpful. Whereas if you're battling for money, and money is just a constant worry, and you've got overheads to meet, then that in itself can create a hotbed for conflict to fester in.
Yeah, that's for sure. I presume we've done tree work in various countries, various continents, if maybe just a little here and there, or because I was going to ask, how does the tree work in Switzerland differ from, say, the UK or the States or that kind of stuff?
It's quite anecdotal. I don't actually have a lot of experience of tree work over an extended period of time in these other places. My observation would be that there's an emphasis on looking at Germany, for instance, which is just across the border from here. Immediately speed becomes the emphasis, because you're trying to get through the work as fast as possible, because budgets are fairly tight. The UK, to be honest, I have almost no experience. Strangely enough, that seems to be actually really rare. I've been there as well for workshops and stuff like that.
But is that just so you say about Germany kind of being more focused on speed? Is that because the company that you run, you make sure it's kind of about quality rather than like production? But is that not a generalization of Switzerland tree care as a whole? It's just mainly the way that you work? Or?
Correct. Yes. No, you're right. Yeah. Do you know what? Actually, to be quite honest, Dan, I couldn't even make a generic statement about tree care in Switzerland. I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, I can only really talk about the environment I'm used to working in, and the couple of other companies that I know well as well. Otherwise, I think I'd be. I think it's hard to make generalizing statements, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is where so my opinion of, so bringing back to a point that you already said about if you want to make a lot of money, tree care isn't kind of the big one to be into, and I think the the main battle with safety in the industry, and that whole point of it being done for speed, because you're trying to make as much money as you can. You're trying to just kind of chase your tail all the time, to meet the quote that the whoever priced the job put on it, which they're trying to kind of only just scrape by so they can get the job and then make a little bit of money. And so you always seem to be chasing that. And I feel like tree work in general just has that vibe about it, which is why we always seem to be battling with safety. Because I kind of always use the example, if you take something like rope access, where they have so many more procedures in place, and kind of their safety seems to be way more paramount than in tree care. Yet, and why is that? Is it because that's more in a commercial environment, so there's more money there, whereas tree care on a lot of the time is more there's a lot of residential work, and so people just feel rushed, and the pressure kind of comes down from the company owners to foreman of the crew to just the guy on the ground. And unless you're working for a really good, safe company, it seems like the time pressure is like the one main thing why people make decisions that maybe aren't the safest in tree work. And I don't know what it's going to take to kind of make that shift in the masses as far as thought processes go, really.
Well, I think the comparison to industrial rope access is maybe a bit unfair, because having a good safety track record is obviously easier if you always have a backup line. Yeah. So yes, obviously there's going to be less incidents then, apart from. But you're also correct in saying these are different environments they're working in. Okay, again, speaking from my perspective, I think where I come back to when I get stressed out about, or when considering a job, I think you need to consider what is an appropriate margin to have on this job, and I think what I tend to strive for is something that's fair both to us, to the company, but also fair to the client. And it's fair to have a reasonable margin on a job. I don't have to max it out. Even if I know if the client is wealthy, I think I wouldn't necessarily go as high as possible. I'd just go reasonable. Then I can communicate that to the client. I can communicate our needs, and I can demonstrate where a margin lies and why I think that that's reasonable. Now, I think if from the get-go I'm struggling to communicate that, I think it's not the crew's risk. I can't just pass that on. So if there's a reason to accept that job regardless, because maybe this is a client who has a lot of other work we do as well, I might just go, right, okay, so I'm going to accept the job. I'm going to accept the job anyway, knowing that I can maybe only pay wages, or I'm going to break even, but I'm not going to pass that on to the crew and send them out, with massive pressure on them to get this job done as fast as possible. We do the job the way we do the job anyway, which is, safely and the way it needs to be done, kind of thing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not their problem to sort if I was not able to sell the job properly.
Yeah.
That pressure belongs on me and not on the people in the field. Yeah. And of course, if you're doing the job and you sold the job, which is often going to be the case, that is a difficult one. I think you need to really try and dissociate yourself from that. I mean, the other week we were doing an interesting crane removal, and I was during the job, I was like, this is going to be really tight getting this all into the day. And then I was like, actually, do you know what? That's a stupid way of looking at it. I'm going to look back at this and go like, that was a really interesting crane removal. So why don't I take the time now to enjoy what I'm doing, and not just enjoy it in hindsight, but actually, be aware of what I'm doing right now and not think about, what if we run over, or what about this and what about that? Because otherwise you just spend your time worrying instead of enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
That totally makes sense, because well, in the past, like, especially back in the UK when I ran a company, I would really get stressed about, because we were always kind of bidding work like quite low to try and get the work, because there was so much competition. And so, quite often we'd be out there and we'd be really going through the work quick, and you wouldn't even take a second to, like you say, enjoy what you're doing. And then if it's obvious that you're going to run over by a couple of hours, the stress starts creeping in, and then it's not until afterwards where you're like, where you kind of think back and you're like, well, it was only a day's work. Like, why did I get so stressed about it? Because once you've finished, all the stress kind of disappears, and you can kind of look back at it and appreciate it. But in the moment, if you let it get on top of you, it can really kind of be a bit of a mental block. And I feel like that's where accidents are more likely to happen in the industry, and that's why people might feel like they're going to take shortcuts, because they think, oh, this is going to run over too long, and I'm going to be home 2 hours later than I thought I was going to be. And I've been in that situation where I've started rushing, and and then afterwards, like when I get home, I'm like, why was I making all these stupid decisions just because I thought I was going to be home a little bit later? And
well, I don't think they're stupid decisions, Dan. I think they're flawed decisions, and I think it's a human condition. Or is the human condition. I read a saying the other week, which was that no one ever has a good idea when being chased by a tiger, and you don't. It's not a good situation to be trying to make well-founded decisions in.
Yeah, and my experience comes back to the point that I was the one who had priced the job, and it was because of the way I'd priced the job. Had put that time, had already kind of set aside this certain amount of time that the job has to be done in. Whereas, so now I've started up my own business again in Canada, and the way that I approach and price work and talk with clients, and the tree work I do has a completely different kind of thought process behind it all now and different approach than what it used to do back in the UK. And now I get the time to like speak with the client on the day and kind of spend 20 minutes with them to make them feel comfortable, and to let them know why we're doing what we're doing. And I've realized that that's what the client's going to remember. They're going to remember that. They're going to remember, or they're going to notice how clean it's left at the end of the day. But as far as like from a kind of a technical point of view, or like tree biology, like they're almost certainly not going to be educated enough to think he's not done that correctly. So I think it's those things where you can price the job, so you allow yourself the time to talk with the client a little bit and to make sure that everything's done right, and it's not done in a hurry. So what you're doing is done to the best of your ability, because you're not thinking, oh well, if I leave this work that I thought I would do, but maybe I'll just won't do that because I don't have the time. I feel now every time I go to a job, I can do exactly what I had intended to do, and I don't have to give them substandard work, and so I think the people that are pricing jobs for companies, that's kind of where the pressure comes from. And I don't know how that's going to change, because tree care and tree work in general, I don't see if it's ever going to get to a standard of maybe even other trades where the money's there because it's a necessity. Because a lot of the time, tree work maybe isn't a necessity for in a lot of people's eyes, unless it's obviously like storm damage work or something.
And I think the other thing, Dan, is it's not a homogenic market. It's every client is a different client. So there's different ends of the market. So there's certain jobs where you'll get a feeling from the first contact you have with the customer, this guy's a cheapskate. And, am I going to quote cheap? No, I'm not, because I'm actually not interested in that work. Either we can establish a relationship where I'm able to communicate the service we can offer, or he's going to go with Speedy Joe's tree service,
Yeah.
And if I start to cut corners to compete with Speedy Joe's tree service, the only way that spiral going to go is down. Yeah. These lost leaders, where somebody's always going to be desperate enough to quote. I saw an ad the other day where somebody was offering to remove trees for firewood, and that's when I'm out. I won't compete with that. We do have overheads, we have wages to pay, we have insurance to pay, we have all of that stuff, like a respectable company does, or somebody's trying to work ethically and professionally. You take care of your people and whatnot, and that entails cost. And my experience is that you'll have a customer base that reflects your work ethic.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and establish relationships that are prepared to accept that a fair deal goes in both directions and is not the minimum possible, but something that allows everybody to get by.
Yeah. You want everybody to be happy with the outcome. You want the client to be happy with what they paid, and you want to be happy that you've done the job to the best of your ability, but you've done it in a time that makes sense with the amount you've charged, and so you're happy, they're happy, and kind of that's the perfect balance, really.
Yeah. Which means that if we go in and I know I'll price the job with amount X and we get the job done faster, then as far as I'm concerned, the client can profit from that as well. And I'll give it to them for less. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So if we going back to I want to get onto the Treemagineers kind of, and how that all started, and where you met Chris and Bedis, and once you'd met those guys, how the journey came along, where you would kind of start talking about different ideas, and then that somehow turned into, right, we're actually going to make a company where we're going to come up with ideas and develop products, and then your relationship with DMM and Teufelberger and
Okay, this is going to be long-winded, Dan. If you want to go to the bathroom for a moment or whatever, I'll just rattle on.
No, I want to listen. This is fascinating stuff to me, because it's one thing to talk with your friends over a beer and have an idea and try and change the world or change the industry in some way or form, but it's one thing from the ideas over a beer to actually putting it into practice and actually doing like the research and development, and then making a product that's actually a good product. And it's
Okay, well, maybe let me start with a disclaimer or two. I don't think what we did is anything unique. I don't have a massive chip on my shoulder about it, and I think nor do the others. And it was very much an organic process that just one step led to the next. Where it started was, I suppose, there was an ETCC in Valencia. It was the first ETCC I went to in '99 in Spain, and we were doing the walkthrough, and I realised that I didn't have any protective glasses there, which shows you how in tune I was with the tree climbing competitions. And there was a bloke there who had obviously somehow I must have realised he had protective glasses, which was Chris, and he lent me his eye protection, and we got talking, and yeah. Somehow transpired that they were living in Germany at that point in time and weren't super happy where they were. So Chris and his family decided to move down in due course, to move down to southern Germany, close to the border. And so Chris started working with us a lot. And I think where our discussions started was they were mainly configuration-based discussions. Why do we climb the way we climb? This configuration we're climbing on, which back in the day would have been as you know, big HMS with the PO5 on it, the Petzl small Petzl fit, the fixed pulley with a tied VT or whatever, and then the end of the line onto the front of the beaner, and identifying issues with that. So we were kind of working through topics, and at the same time we're also aware that Bettis was working on a harness prototype, and we kind of reached a point, Chris and I, in our discussions where we're like, this may not be a technique fix. There may actually be a tool missing. So we started thinking about what a tool might look like, and started working through various permutations there. We also realized, as you say, that many people have good ideas, but turning good ideas into product is maybe not that easy. So we included Bettis in the discussion, and went about creating some entity, a company that might make it easier to interface with manufacturers. And then we just started talking with manufacturers, and our reference.
Did you start talking to manufacturers before you had an idea, or you were kind of throwing around things and you had a bit of an idea, or you had a product that you'd kind of already decided this is what needs making?
The harness was pretty much finished, or was well advanced at that point in time. The other things were, it was the hitch climber actually, was an ongoing project. A first hardware manufacturer we were working with evolved that further. We talked to any number of manufacturers, and everybody is obviously keen to talk to people with ideas. Our reference points at that point in time we were very much looking at the Arbormaster model, or looking to the way that Petzl was doing things, just as reference points for us. But in hindsight, I think we also gave away a lot in that period when we were talking to manufacturers, because, as I say, they're all keen to discuss. And of course,
what you got here.
Yeah. They were like,
I find that's one question I had for you. I find that fascinating. in how you approach a company and kind of tell them that you've got an idea, but without telling them the idea in case they, before you've come to any agreement, they kind of run off with your idea. Like
there's a leap of faith moment. Certainly. Interesting enough, Petzl were the first company we approached. I think we approached them, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to talk, but before you come to us, we'd strongly suggest that you protect your ideas, just register them, because if we see something we like, we're going to take it. And they were the first people to say that, which I thought was a very fair thing to say. Everybody else is just like, yeah, just come right over. And so, consequently, when we, and then, so we were kind of starting to run out of ideas, and there was, that's right, March 2006, there's a super heavy snowfall here. And I remember because there's lots of snow damage, and we had lots of freelancers come in, and we were working through snow damage for a good part of that year. But so it must have been February or March 2006 or 2005. Anyway, doesn't matter. There was this one obscure company in Austria that we'd heard of, this company called Teufelberger, who had nothing to do with tree care at that point in time. And so we got in touch with them, and Marcus Langanger, a Teufelberger rep, came to Basel to meet us. And we went into the cafe around the corner from the yard, which was completely steamed up because of the snow outside and the people indoors drinking coffee and stuff. And this cafe was really full. So we got out on the clothes rack, we started rigging up, the hitch climber and ropes and the harness. And people were like, what? And you could see Marcus just going like, what on earth have I got myself tangled up with here? But, to give him the benefit, he was like, yeah, whatever. This is weird, but I'm going to roll with it. The guy must have just been like, what?
And was there a bunch of other just, general people in there having them morning coffee or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were just like, what on earth? So, yeah. And and then basically we then went on to certify the harness as a proof of concept to Teufelberger. And then once we'd done that, they took it from there. And it was interesting. I was in Minnesota last week doing an event, which was kind of satisfying because 2006, of course, was the first year we showed the Treemotion at ITCC in Minneapolis. So it felt a bit like coming full circle.
One big circle, yeah, nice.
And we did, of course, at that point in time, we didn't really have the money, and to be honest, not the knowledge to patent the. There were features on the Treemotion we could have patented. Definitely the forward Ds, but we didn't. And in a sense, I'm also glad we didn't. I think it would have been quite arrogant in some ways because we didn't have any idea how the market would receive that harness. So we didn't. In hindsight, we probably lost money, but in the sense that But then again, we'd just be chasing people today, defending that patent, which is that how you want to be earning money? Not really.
Yeah.
I don't believe that patents are a especially ethical thing or especially beneficial to humanity. But, there's a reality to it, which is you're actually forced to protect your ideas because there's a risk otherwise that somebody's going to come and do it for you, and you end up paying somebody else to be able to use your idea.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's it. Kind of all gets a bit sticky when it comes to that side of the business. patents, and there's
not the most savoury, so not the most savoury side of it, is it?
No. And then so the hitch climber came how
Basically,
long after that?
launched them together.
Oh, right, okay.
Hitch climber and the hitch climber based work positioning system. I mean, one thing that we gained with Teufelberger was a lot of know-how in terms of stitching. They had Egon, who was one of their older engineers, who just had an encyclopedic knowledge when it came to stitching. We're like, the termination has to be as short as possible, and he came up with the goods. This just a really compact termination for the eye-to-eye slings, and I mean, I certainly don't regret that decision going with those two companies. Again, the same thing can be said as of a relationship or a tree care company. Is it always smooth running, smooth sailing? No, it's not. But you just work through conflict and you work through issues, and you come out the other side a little bit wiser. And
it seems like an amazing kind of partnership you've struck up with DMM and Teufelberger, because they're obviously companies that can make products. So you would think sometimes that, well, they can make and design their own products. So why would they want to bring somebody else on board that's gonna? Because at the end of the day, they're a business, and are they in it to make money? And could they develop something without somebody else taking a share of profits and stuff? But they're obviously open-minded enough to speak and to collaborate with you guys and obviously they collaborate together, like DMM, Teufelberger, so that to bring your ideas to life. And it's pretty cool to see that they're willing to help you guys out to kind of develop your ideas, because they have so much kind of trust in you being, at the height of the industry and kind of forward thinking. And
well, I'm sure there are days when they ask themselves that question as well. But I think the truth of the matter is that it's a structure that has been mutually beneficial and has allowed all of the involved parties to grow beyond what they could have been if there hadn't been that synergy. Is it something that's going to last forever? Nothing does. But I mean, I think from then to now, I think it's been good for all involved. And I believe there's other things we can do together, looking forwards from here. And these companies are not charities. We need to deliver, they need to produce. Do we always get it right? No, we don't. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we do. But I think when mistakes are made, I think you just try and communicate about them in an open fashion, especially if you're evolving novel concepts. There are things that can go wrong, and then you just try and just be honest about it in terms of how these things are communicated. I was going to say something, I've forgotten.
So are there any, it might be a hard question to answer, but are there any products that you have kind of helped design and launch that you're not that happy with? I know that obviously that's a strange thing for you to answer, because it might affect the product. I don't know but would you rather have done something a little differently?
Well, there's always small things that you that in hindsight you do differently. I mean, our design spec for the designer we were using for the original hitch climber was, we want it flared, we want this, we want that. And it wasn't flared the way we would have liked to have it flare. But then again, that allows you to revisit it, as we have with the eccentric now, that, whatever it is, 13 years down the line, has those features incorporated we would like to have then. My experience is that all along this journey, you learn things that maybe at that point in time are not applicable, and you put them in a drawer, and then 3 years down the road you're like, but hold on, actually we could take that idea from back then out of the drawer and apply that to this product, and it allows you to move forwards. And yeah, I've remembered what I was going to say before. And increasingly, what we've been doing through this process is become more and more diligent about our validation process. Is to just be really robust in validating products, and if it needs another set of prototypes, you prototype again, and you validate again, and that's cutting corners in development. That I think you can't be thorough enough when it comes to validating.
Yeah.
I've lost track again of the question. Anyway, sorry.
But that must be a. I mean, obviously, through your experience of developing products, you've got to that stage. But when you have a product and you've got a prototype, you must be so eager to just get it out to market. Like you say now, you kind of you develop it and then you revisit it and then you create another prototype and another one until like you're 100% happy. But it must be hard to say, yeah, let's tweak something a little bit more, and knowing it's going to take like another 6 months to a year to get that new one designed and test it and see. Yeah.
No, that is super. Frustrating is the wrong word, and I'm really thankful to Chris and Elliot, the designer we work with, that they're just they're just so diligent when it comes to that. Just going the extra mile to make sure that we get the best product possible. Can it get better? Yes, it can get better, but this way, I'm just it just gives me a certainty that we're delivering the best thing possible at that point in time with the knowledge that we had at that point in time, which kind of brings me back to something I meant to say before when we were talking about different company structures, whether you're in a partnership or not. Sometimes I think, how great would it be to do this all on my own? Because then I could just, sit in my armchair and decide upon something and implement it the next day, rather than have to go through tedious discussion and finding a consensus and then implementing that, which is just more unwieldy, isn't it? But all of the projects I'm involved in involve more than one person, more than just myself. And it means that when I go out, I have the certainty of a process that led up to a decision, which involved lots of discussion, compromise, finding a consensus. But once you have that joint decision, it's just really well founded. You've gone through various permutations, you've considered various outcomes, and I find that's something that gives me just peace of mind, and it allows me to enter into situations with a greater certainty because that discussion has been had.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is very beneficial to have people around you to kind of to pull up different questions that you might not have thought of, and when you hit a speed bump, you kind of, if you're on your own, maybe you couldn't kind of think of a way past it. And
also I think you just get fixated on that one, your one favorite aspect. I mean, I like to say when I'm revisiting an old presentation that I put together 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and there's that one slide, my favorite slide. And every time when I'm reworking presentations, I'll look at that one favorite slide and go, okay, it's a kill your heroes moment. Okay, is this statement I'm making beneficial or conducive to the argument I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make? If not, I'm going to slash it.
Yeah.
And I find that quite interesting sometimes. These sort of key concepts or pet concepts that you're fixated on. Is it really beneficial to the problem you're trying to solve, or is it time to throw this overboard because it's just fluff?
Yeah, it's definitely. I know what you mean with presentations. You definitely need a fresh set of eyes on there, because you can think you've got the best idea possible and it's really going to hit home. And yeah, like you say, your favorite slide, whereas to get some fresh set of eyes on it and see what they think, and that'll tell you if it's a good idea or not, kind of thing. Yeah. So with Treemagineers, then are you constantly in touch with like Chris and Bettis and throwing around ideas for future products, or how does it work? Do you kind of arrange to meet like twice a year, or I don't know how close you are with like distance wise to these guys, and or sometimes does one of you have an idea and that's when you contact the others?
Well, we've been through different phases. It depends also, what stage we are at with which product. I mean, we have an annual meeting end of the year where we just go and hide for a week in southern Germany and just use that to look backwards and forwards, take stake of where we are. And if you're into a sort of hot phase of a project working towards deadlines, there'll be more meetings which can happen in Wales or can happen at Bettis's place or wherever. We all tend to meet up for the tree care days in Augsburg in Germany. I'll do events with Chris in the US throughout the year. So yeah, and yes, apart from that, we're in touch. But Chris will carry on the development work with Elliot and the folk at DMM. I'll be doing Treemagineers stuff in the sense that doing events or whatever on my own, and Bettis just goes and hides in trees somewhere on the Schwäbisch Alb. But
So
it's definitely
different.
different. I think we all contribute different skills, and it's worked to here. So, to this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what does your typical month look like? Because you travel a lot to do like presentations or workshops, things like that. So,
Well, it's quite variable. There's when I can be home, when I need to be home, I'm home, and then there'll be other months when there's sort of certain fixed events during the years. During the year, there'll be, as I mentioned, Augsburg, the Tree Care Days and Climbers Forum in Augsburg in April, May. There's Vertical Connect in autumn. The last years, I've always done ETCC and ITCC in summer, TCI Expo in autumn. And then there's things that just in around that. I'll have people will get in touch and we'll just, if I'm able to make events, or run workshops or whatever, I'm happy to do so. Having said that, I do always ask myself the question of, can I actually contribute something of value to, where I'm going? Because I do think there is also accountability there, in terms of, transport and the emissions that you're causing and all of that stuff. I'm a bit on the fence about that at the moment.
yeah. So when you go like to that point, when you go somewhere, do you try and line up kind of multiple different like presentations in the same country or in the same region? Yeah.
Yeah, in an ideal world, I would. But the truth of the matter is, Dan, is that I tend to run out of steam. As these are quite high intensity events. So, and I know that if I've done, 2 days, 3 days, I tend to be toast. I have done in the past, but I know that after 3 or 4 days of being on a stage, I tend to run out of steam a little bit. So the reality is, it often tends to be just an in and out business. So if when I go to Japan, for instance, we'll usually do 2 days in one place and then have a day off and then do 2 or 3 days in another place, kind of thing, and then that's me done.
Yeah, it's it's mentally draining, that's for sure.
It is, and I do want to make sure that I think people deserve 100% and not something that's diluted. So I think you just need to decide how much you're able to deliver.
Yeah. So what products are you excited about? Do you have any that haven't launched that you're about to launch at the moment?
Yeah. But the sad thing is that if I could tell you about it, but then I'd have to kill you and everybody who's listening to this podcast, which would probably get a bit messy, wouldn't it? I could stab them through their headphones.
Yeah. What about okay, let's talk about you did like an impact block with a load cell inside it. So is that aimed at like is that aimed at more kind of more as a training tool for certain companies, or did you design that for just any company to buy as their block, or is it a specific tool for more for like a training tool?
Well, the load sensing impact blocks are made by DMM. They're basically just an extended large impact block, and then they go to Straight Point, who integrate the load cell, at which point it becomes a Straight Point product. I think the price point of those units is pretty attractive. I mean, it's still an expense, but for our training company, for instance, we bought a couple. We use them in training. I've used the one I have here on job sites, during a rigging operation to track the peak forces we're generating over a day. I think it's quite easy to justify that expenditure because it allows you to, once we know peak forces we're generating, we can start to talk about safety factors that we incorporate into our rigging systems and how we're going to have that discussion if we don't know what
you don't have the figures.
So I really see this iteration of a load sensing block as part of a process towards load sensing tools that we have that will just become part of a normal job site. When we're rigging, I do think in the future we'll have more compact units that basically you just log onto your mobile or onto a tablet, and at the end of the day you can go and look at the peak forces you were generating and actually have a founded discussion about where we're getting it right, where was it higher than you thought it would be.
Because it would actually be a really good learning tool to do it like in real time, like as you rigged a piece out, everybody, if you weren't trying to get the job done and it was more of like say you were doing a tree removal that you knew was going to be a learning tool, to then gather everybody around and say, right, these are the results of that one piece that came off, or everybody kind of estimates what they think is going to be the result, and then you have a discussion, and then you say, right, we can take something a bit bigger and play around with different size pieces of what you rig down.
And how good were we at limiting the peak force during the lowering? All that, and you can do that, or you could just have it running, have the logging running passively in the background. so that at the end of the day you have a look at the figures. It could be ongoing, real time, it could be retrospectively at the end of the day as part of a debrief. There's any number of ways you could use that. So I guess my answer to your question is there's many ways that you can use that tool. I think in a bigger picture, it's not a massive expense. I can certainly justify it.
Yeah.
And whilst the unit is not is quite large, if you actually think about smaller versions of load cells that you can have at the anchor point, by the time you've incorporated 2 connectors plus a pulley, that unit is actually almost longer than the load sensing impact block. So, and it has such a big range as to the loads you can impose on it. I'm actually quite happy where that ended up. But as I say, I think those units are going to get more compact as time goes by.
Yeah.
And one of the big things about it is, of course, it has radio links in both directions. It's radio to the handheld and vice versa. So you're not losing the signal, which is massively beneficial over, I don't know, Bluetooth, for instance, or some other connection, or infrared or whatnot. Radio is just a really robust connection. And it has a fast sampling rate. I'm sorry, interrupting you. And it has a fast sampling rate.
Do you know of any? Has there been much testing of this kind of stuff in the past, like of people? Is there much data out there on rigging certain loads and in certain configurations and that kind of thing? Because figures are so important to the safety of moving forward and how we decide configurations and size of pieces, but taking different species into consideration, there's so many variables as well. The list of figures could be endless, really, for what you could do. But do you even know of anybody else who's done this kind of testing before?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the UK HSE Forestry Commission rigging research document remains the reference. Is for me the go-to document when it comes to that. Of course, for the scientific part of that, Andy was building on Pete Donzelli's numbers, which were incorporated into the Art and Science of rigging, the ISA publication. But really, the rigging research document for me is the most comprehensive and scientifically robust document that's out there to date. That's tragically underused. I think as an industry, there's just a massive of data and information in there that we've barely tapped so far.
And what's where is that? Is that a document you can get online, or do you have to purchase a publication? Or
no, you get it on. If you enter into your search engine, rigging research, HSE. I think it's R668 or something like that. Anyway, you'll find it. It's a free PDF download. It's a almost 400-page document. I think it's well worth printing out and taking it to the copy shop and having it bound, because it's something I go back to time and again.
Yeah.
You can thank me later.
I will do. Yeah, I'll take that down and I'll take a look at that. I haven't seen that before, so.
Oh, you'll be happy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because I actually bought a load cell recently for more for climbing forces, and because I find there's so many. There's the theory out there of what's going to generate force, and then you make a configuration of a climbing system, and if I were to post something on like a social media of a certain configuration, it might generate people to say, oh, what about load forces, this, that, and the other. And I feel like there's a lot of people that have a little knowledge, like a little bit of knowledge on forces because of like the theoretical part of it, but nobody actually has definite practical real world experience of these forces. And so I bought a load cell on a bit of a whim, really, just because I was like, I'm just so intrigued at actually what the real world forces are going to be. And so and then I started thinking about all the different testing that I could do. And yeah, I've got a list as long as my arm, but it's just finding time to do it. And just, yeah, like things just from as simple as, the force foot locking would put on an anchor point, and then the force that ascending on a basal anchor like a single rope system would put on an anchor point, and then climbing around the canopy and using different configurations and redirects and how much what it's actually doing, and because nobody really has an understanding, we just kind of almost trust our instinct, and we trust our experiences, and then we trust who we've learned from.
Yep. Which is not a bad thing. I mean, I think I'd say the following, Dan, is that I think anything we can use to improve our knowledge and our understanding is good. I think it's notoriously difficult to design tests to prove these kinds of things that are scientifically robust. I think what we can do is we can strive to improve our understanding. We can identify trends, maybe, but to make statistically robust statements that's ambitious, and that's not what I'm hearing you saying. But I'm thinking back to, I think it was in St. Louis, where during ITCC. Andy Detter set up a load cell in the work climb tree and weighed all the climbers, and they were measuring the loads during the work climb.
All right.
But actually, after the event, he realized that because the whole tree was inclined, the inclination of the tree was soaking up a lot of the force that the climbers were generating. So actually, the load at the anchor point was not really very interesting.
Yeah.
So these kind of things, small unforeseens or small variables, can easily trip you up. And therefore, I think because of the degree of variability that you mentioned, I think it's going to be very hard to make a sort of an exhaustive, definitive statement about always do this or never do this. It'll always be testing has shown that, but at the end of the day, you need to use your risk assessment to decide what, how exactly you're going to perform the work at hand based upon circumstances that you find yourself confronted with. But on the way there, I do believe we can go deeper and increase our understanding, the depth of our understanding of the forces we're generating. Yes, indeed. And for that, load cells are an essential tool. So good on you. That was a good whim.
What I find is that for me personally, as I get feedback from say something like the load cell in the rigging block that you've designed, as that gives you figures, or as you use one of these log weight charts, and then use like a calculation to measure what that's actually going to weigh once it's rigged off on itself and all that kind of thing. I find when I actually see that figure, and I'm like, Jesus, that is a huge figure. And even when climbing with this load cell, I'd never even thought about it before, how much force I'm putting on an anchor point. So I'd never thought how much could an anchor point or a tree take in a certain union. And then once I actually see like a real life figure, it almost surprises me and makes me more aware and more careful in how I'm I'm choosing what I'm rigging or how I'm choosing where I'm anchoring to, because now I have this knowledge in my head of how much force I'm putting on it. Even though I was always doing that before, having a figure to work with, I look at like a tiny union and where I would be happy to tie into, but now I'm knowing that I'm putting, like a certain amount of force on this tiny little union. Does that kind of gel together?
No, I agree. These things are not, they're not intuitive, and they're not visible straight away, is it? But then again, obviously you're somebody who realizes this from the get-go, and yes, then that's a helpful tool. And you probably also, I'm pretty sure you also don't believe that the Earth is flat, so which is good as well. It's not, by the way.
Thank you for
that. But no, I think those are big learning curves. I think there's other things you can do which are really interesting as well, which is, when you do have space, for instance, and you're dismantling a tree, why not, load an anchor point to failure? Just see what that looks like. That's taught me a lot as well, not even measuring the load, but just seeing what a completely maxed out anchor point looks like. Actually seeing things, because truth of the matter is that we're all experts at non-failing anchor points. None of us are experts at anchor points that fail, which I think in turn can create a confirmation bias. Is that because we're not used to something fail, we don't expect it to fail. So actually, as I say, when the opportunity is there to deliberately fail an anchor point, it can be very interesting.
It's funny. That's something I've never thought about doing. Is actually forcing a failure on an anchor point. If I've got the space.
We did some testing in Scotland a number of years ago, where it's almost 100 drops, I think we did, with log weights from 200 kgs all the way up to 1 ton. And some of the drops, they were factor 2 drops onto, it was always the same diameter attachment sling we had, and we were working our way through different diameters of rigging lines. And it's absolutely fascinating, especially the 12 mil Sirius rigging line. Some of those drops, we're like, this is going to fail. And it just stretches and stretches and stretches and holds. And you're like, whoa. And then other times, and the anchor point wasn't failing, the line was failing because it was on stem. But even there, seeing rigging systems failing, to me was a big learning curve.
Yeah.
In terms of just gaining a better feeling or a sense of where within that range of tolerable load are we actually moving? Am I always erring on the side of caution, or am I actually maxing out the system without realizing it? And how cool would it be is if those branches, the unions that we're tied into, change their color as we start to load them more? The limb starts out brown and then it goes orange, red.
Like on a computer game, yeah.
But they don't.
Your energy bar.
Yeah, they don't. So oh well.
Yeah, that's what we get for working with nature.
Yeah, very flawed.
Yeah. I mean, for the majority of people, obviously doing those kind of testing, it's never going to happen, because it takes a lot of gear to kind of go through that kind of stuff, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. Yeah, that was massive, absolutely massive, and expensive, obviously, but or an expense. But I think what we can easily do is you can just say, look, we could drop this tree, or we could just, alternately, we could got some old rigging strops. Let's see what happens if we chunk a really big bit into it.
Yeah.
Just to get a sense of.
And what about the trolley that you designed? Have you done much? Obviously, you've done a lot of testing with that, or have you done much work? It's pretty specialized.
Yep.
Bit of kit, but.
Yep. The off-ear trolley
Yeah, or trolley. Yeah.
Uh, I've had it on a couple of jobs. There's still only a couple of prototypes floating around. My observation is those high lines are fantastic because if you've got a job site with multiple trees and you've got a spar tree or potential spar tree front and back or at either end of the range where you're trying to remove trees, unlike a speed line which starts high and ends low, the high line, as the name implies, stays high all along the way. So basically all along that high line becomes your drop zone because I can pick up a limb or stem or whatever. I can move it to any point along the high line and I can lower it down there. And actually because the high line is anchored high, tension becomes less of an issue. It doesn't have to be super tight. Whereas the
Yeah.
speed line, because it ends low, has to be tight because otherwise I lose height too soon. So I think there's a number of benefits from a Tyrolean type high line. Also the ability to be able to bring in pieces from either side that are to the left or to the right. I can actually winch them up into the high line, bring them high, and then run them out and lower them down further down the line. So whilst it's obviously a specialist piece of gear, I do think there's situations in which you might have that one job that makes it worthwhile, that pricing that into your price because of the competitive edge it gives you, or maybe a couple of companies might buy a tool like that together.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be thousands of that unit sold. I do think there's a market for it.
Yeah.
And
Did you,
time will tell, Dan. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same with any product we've launched. Is until they've launched it, you don't know. Obviously,
you
we
don't know.
believe in it, but the market validates it. We don't validate we do the field validation, but actually saying yes, this has value in our work. The market does that. The end user does that.
Yeah. And obviously, do you feel like that it's going to be a product that's going to be picked up more by different industries than
Yes.
tree care?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be more popular for.
Well, somebody's got it running on a film set at the moment. They're doing some technical rigging for that. I was, I think, yeah. I think there's maybe forestry applications for it. And again, this is interesting to see where it goes because you anticipate uses of it, but actually,
Yeah.
we've had lots of captains, for instance, being sold into areas that we hadn't anticipated, for instance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or just unexpected things that sell well, and things where like that thing is going to sell like hot cookies, and you're like the sales are kind of meh,
Yeah.
expected more kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see kind of what direction it takes, really. But I first came across the idea where I can't remember the guy's name who must have helped develop it with you. He made a video of it.
Yeah, John Lloyd, the
The
Birdland
Birdland,
videos.
yeah, 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 that was pretty cool to see it being used, and probably it was the first time. Might have been the first time I'd seen. I mean, maybe I'd seen people using a similar setup, but building like a system out of all kinds of different pulley blocks and stuff. Whereas that having that one unit, um, yeah, in like basically making the system was pretty impressive, especially that job where it seemed like it was the ideal tool for what he was
Yep.
trying to achieve. Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, one comment I'd make to that is, it's like when you're looking at a job and you're going, this is the perfect job for a speed line. In my experience, that perfect job or perfect site for a speed line is pretty rare. And I think more jobs, you're going to be able to run more jobs with a high line because the anchor point requirements are a little bit more forgiving, because they don't have to be perfectly in line with the object you're working on. They can be off to the left or the right, because I can bring pieces in. So yeah, and the other thing is that whilst you're absolutely right, you can configure that highline trolley out of, rigging plates and connectors and pulleys. Any play that you have between connectors, pulley and rigging plate are going to manifest themselves as loss in efficiency.
Yeah.
So I thought that using the Offia and the Arbor winch line, which is a Dyneema rigging line, is just super responsive. There's no loss due to elongation or to pieces flopping, hardware flopping around. It's just all very immediate.
So the rigging line that you were using was like a static.
Yeah, the lifting line, we were using
Yeah.
the Arbor winch.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good.
Nice. Yeah. So, and does that come out for? When does that launch then?
I think there's a couple of changes been made. I can't quote your launch date, but I think that's very much, it can't be far off, put it that way.
Nice. Look forward to it. And I saw on your website that you've now done some kind of collaboration with North American Training Solutions.
Yeah.
So what's that entail?
Is a strategic partnership, or expanding the strategic partnership that we already had with DMM and Teufelberger, to include North American Training Solutions and Paper Trail, because we believe that that offers a comprehensive package of know-how and expertise. I mean, obviously, Paper Trail, for those who may not be aware of it, are the sort of backbone of DMM's RFID system, which uses RF tags to identify pieces of equipment. They're sort of, they have zip ties or stickers or labels with these tags in them, and Paper Trail supplies the software, or makes the software, writes the software that this data is then entered into, which is just a super easy system to use. And NATS offer training in North America, and we just felt that they were a good organization to work with, because they're just a massive replicator into the industry. And if we're trying to reach, as we were saying at the beginning of this chat, as many people as possible, and trying to offer the opportunity to as many people as possible to expand the scope of the ways that they work in, we just felt that NATS fit that bill well, and was sort of in line with the way that we feel is a good way to achieve that target, or made a good fit. There you go.
Yeah. And did you kind of actively go out and try and make this kind of I don't know what you call it, partnership or alliance or
Collaboration?
Yeah.
I mean, we've known the folk at NATS for a long time, so it just felt like an obvious fit. We entered into discussion with them and established that the sort of common goals, and and decided just to go for it, see where it goes. And it's not about monopolizing anything or like that. We just felt that it would offer us an opportunity to expand again, that would be beneficial to the industry, and would be beneficial to us as well, in terms of the scope and range of services that can be provided, or of potential benefits in terms of synergies. I think there's any number of reasons. And at the end of the day, you don't know until you've tried.
Yeah. Nice. Well, yeah. Hope it kind of works well, and you can.
Yep. See where that goes.
Yeah, bring some good stuff together. Yeah, I had one more thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly. You're the chairman of the ETCC, is that correct? Or you help run it or organize it?
Yeah, to be honest, no. That last year was the last year.
Oh, okay.
I've kind of stepped away also from ITCC just because I felt it was time for new people with new visions, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think, I really appreciate having had the opportunity to be part of both of those events. Certainly, it's had a massive influence on allowing me to grow, to experience things I wouldn't have experienced otherwise. Gained many friends through being part of that, and I wouldn't want to step away from it completely. But it definitely felt like time for. I didn't want what I had to offer to become stale and become like a well-trodden track. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll see where that goes.
And how? So you used to compete, and you competed in the ETCC, and you won it. Did you win it a couple of times? Once?
I think 04, 05, wasn't it? I think twice ETCC. Yeah.
And then how long after that did you kind of step away from the competition, being an active competitor, and go into?
I think it was 08 or 09. I think Malmo was the first time that I was involved in the organisation. 08. Anyway, the late noughties.
And did you must have enjoyed and got a lot out of the opposite end of the competition, like the organisation and seeing the goings on and helping, I don't know, give ideas for rule changes or like the way that things were scored and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, certainly. And I think we were able as a group to do really interesting, dynamic things with that event. Again, I come back to one of the opening comments, which is you're only able to do what you do because of the people around you. And again, I was lucky to have a group of people around me there who shared that vision, and we were able to I think we're able to contribute something that was relevant, hopefully, to a fairly large group of people. Okay, I wasn't going to say this, but I do think that the events have changed. I do think that the expectations in terms of level of professionalism of the services being provided at these competitions have just grown exponentially to where today it's almost, people almost expect a sort of semi-professional event, with great prizes, great camping, great trees, cheap beer, good food, good evening entertainment, and all of this off the backs of volunteers, and it's just, there's a mismatch there. And I just think it's something that the next years will show where that goes. It's not a criticism, it's an observation. I just feel that these events belong to the volunteers who run them as much as the competitors who come to climb. And I certainly disagree with a vision of it, or just personally disagree with a vision that the winner takes it all. I think it has to be beneficial to every single person who comes there. Otherwise, why the hell are we doing these things? If it's only about the person who wins, I think that becomes quite hollow to me, or just becomes less interesting. Then again, if it's a shared experience where we all stand to gain from. And sometimes I think we just ought to dial it all back and just turn it into really low-key jamboree type things again. But
take it back to the bare bones of what it was.
Really. But of course that doesn't work because it is what it is. So again, I think it's just all of that, what I just said, I think just reaffirms to me it's time for new people to take over and just apply their visions, and we just see where it goes. At the end of the day, you're always just you sort of take temporary stewardship of these things and take it, part of the way, and then other people take over, as same as I was able to take over from people before me, kind of thing.
Obviously everybody has a different vision, and if somebody comes in with the different vision to yourself, and they can take it in a different direction or build on what it is already. Obviously the way that things have gone, and the more it becomes like a bigger event, obviously the more is involved to putting it on. And I completely agree with, because it's all volunteer based, that you need to give the volunteers something. And what I mean by that is, if you volunteer for something and you can learn from the event, and you enjoy it because you can go away from a weekend having spoken to a bunch of knowledgeable people and having seen a bunch of great climbers do things that you'd never seen before, then it's so important. But I suppose if you don't feel like you're appreciated, then why would you go back the next year? Or if you don't gain from it yourself, why would you go back the next year?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I definitely see your
and
point.
Certainly I did 2 terms as head tech for ITCC, and that almost the whole of that time was very much not dominated, but actually one dominant aspect of that period was this whole question of uncertified tools being brought in, which led to, you were there, which led to massive conflict and a lot of grief and polarization within the community, which I thought was really regrettable. And I wish it could have been different, because we wasted a lot of energy, and I think the degree of conflict is definitely regrettable. But I remain adamant that the position that we had then, and I still have today, is I can only make a call on something that I need to have some grounds to make a call on something. I can't just look at something and say that it's safe, because I know that I can't do that. And I think the definition of a competent person is a person who is competent within a range and knows when he or she is leaving that range, is outside their range of competence. And I cannot look at a tool and know how it's going to behave under extreme conditions. So I do expect a manufacturer to provide me with that information to be able to base that call on. If I don't have that information, I'm going to fail it. So, yeah.
So it's a tough position to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you know that what you're going to say is not going to be what somebody wants to hear, but you feel strongly enough that you have to make your decision anyway. It's a tough spot to be placed in. For sure.
And I also think it's just about being humble. I just don't have the answers. I know I don't have the answers to everything, and I will not let myself be bullied into giving an answer just because I know that's what people want to hear. I can't. It's not honest. It's not ethical. And at the end of the day, it's just there's a high risk involved, which is if something does go wrong, how the hell am I going to back up this position that I based just upon a desire to be a good mate?
Yeah.
It's not enough. especially not if there's a risk of people getting hurt.
Yeah, not if lives are involved yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but again, maybe that's just my blinkered vision, and maybe there's a much more open-minded way of looking at it, and good luck to whoever takes over. Well,
Yeah. Well, what we'll finish on is I don't know if this is going to be hard or not for you, but can you recall an experience, good or bad, from your working career that you could share with people that people could kind of take away and learn from your experience, either being a close call of something or being a good experience where something you tried a new technique and it worked well on a job and kind of, I don't know. I know that's putting you on the spot.
no, it's good. No, it's good. Well, I thought one thing. Yeah, I thought one interesting insight. Well, that was fairly recent insight. Was running a workshop in Finland year before last, where so Marika from Finland emails me. She's like, do you want to come to Finland and do a workshop here end of November, 2 days, and then there's our Christmas party. And I was like, hey, the Christmas party of the Finnish Arbor Association, that's got to be good. I'm like, yeah, I'm game. But hold on, actually, workshop, what exactly it's November in Finland, sounds dark and wet and
Sounds
cold.
dark, yeah.
She's like, no, we'll go indoors, in the climbing gym for the first day, and then second day we'll do something with cranes with a crane outdoors, and then the third day is the conference. And I was like, yeah, whatever, you're finished, so, and they're cool, so, and and going to Finland's interesting anyway, because half the industry, 50% of the people working in tree care industry are women, so that makes for an interesting, different kind of vibe that the industry has, and they're just nice people. So anyway, I decided to go, and then first day was fine. We're indoors in the climbing gym, and it was really quite dark outdoors and quite unappealing. And I kind of had, the back of my mind, I was like, tomorrow we're going outdoors, and then and Florim was with me on that trip. And so second day, we go to the venue, and then there's 50 Finnish arborists there in the morning, very politely sitting there waiting for us to get going. So I do the whole spiel, a sort of PowerPoint presentation on planning, crane work and bits and bobs, and then I'm looking out the window. It's 9 o'clock. I'm like, whoa, it's really dark outside, and fuck me, that there's horizontal snow blowing past the window. And I'm like, eek, actually, we're going out there afterwards. So 9:15. I'm like, all right, let's take a break and drink some coffee, and then maybe go outdoors afterwards. They're like, yeah, we're going out. I'm like, whatever. So we do that, head out. Everybody's in their vehicles. We're driving out to the job site. It's kind of it's a bit less dark than it was before, but there's quite a lot of snow on the ground. And as we're driving along, I'm like, crumbs, I don't know the job site, I don't know the tree, I don't know the crane, I don't know the type of crane, I don't know the crane operator, I don't know the client, and I don't know the guy whose job this is. That's quite a lot of unknowns. In fact, it's only unknowns. So we get on site, and I'm like, Flo, can you get all the gear out? And I'm just going to have a quick shufty at the tree. And I did that. It's a 3-axle Liebherr crane, a nice compact unit. Well, worked with those before, so they're good. Crane operator talks English, so that's cool. Client's cool. It's a birch tree. It's 5 picks maybe. This is going to be okay. I mean, snow's still coming in horizontal, but it's going to be okay. Get round the back of the house, and there's the crew's there, and we have a chat about attaching to the hook and this, that, and the other, and I'm ready to go up in the tree. So I get installed in the hook. I've got like a long sleeve merino jumper on, get my raincoat over the top. I was going to put on a high vis jacket, but I couldn't find it, and I was like, the coat is bright red, so that will be okay. Put the radio holster over the top, and it's kind of fresh, but it's going to be okay because it's only 5 picks. So the guy lifts me up over the building, and the moment I'm over the building, the wind hits me, and I'm just like, oh, that's really cold. And kind of cold that takes your breath away for a moment. So I'm like, okay, let's just get a wriggle on. This is going to be fine. So I do the first pick, comes out nice and balanced. Second pick comes out balanced. First piece of stem comes out. Second piece of stem, I get the saw jammed. I'm like, it's a bit off. So yeah, whatever. I can. And I was like, oh no, the guys on the ground are laughing, and they're laughing at me. And then I was like, no. These are difficult conditions. The wind was blowing so hard, it was pushing the hook to one side. So I was actually struggling to see whether I had the hook in line with the head of the crane. So I just got a second saw up and made the cut, lifted the piece off, moved down further. Next piece, exactly the same thing. I'm like, this is weird. Why is this happening? And in the end, I got down to the ground. And it's only then that I realised that I was getting so cold that the cold was affecting my judgment,
Wow.
and I didn't realise that in the tree. And it's interesting because it made me realise that when you read about alpine accidents, when people start doing irrational things in the cold, the perfidious thing is you do not realise that that's what's happening. And on a lesser scale, that's what was happening there. But again, I got down to the ground. I was like, look, I'm not here because I claim to not make mistakes, but I'm here to discuss how can we work backwards when a mistake has been made. How can you work it backwards to a point where you can reverse the mistake, mitigate whatever the problem is, and move forwards again? It's about problem solving. It's not about not making mistakes. So I guess, and they were polite anyway, and the party was cool. So there's definitely a learning curve there.
Yeah.
That was a learning experience. Yeah, and there's actually many examples now that I think of it, but that's certainly one. The trick is to make new mistakes every day and not repeat the same old mistakes that you did, yesterday and the day before and the day before that. That's kind of what I strive for.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because we're all going to make mistakes, and you just got to make, well, hopefully they're not huge mistakes that are putting yourself or people at risk. But if you can learn from mistakes every day, like you say, and you don't repeat it the next day, because if you're repeating it the next day, then you're not going anywhere.
That makes you foolish.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, that was a good one. That must have been some kind of cold to realize afterwards that your judgment was off because of how cold you were.
I think it's just wind chill as well. Actually, it does. Well, and I was just underdressed. Again, there's a chain of events that lead to, or you're focused on one thing and you're missing the blindingly obvious thing, which is, like your mum says, put on an extra jumper, dear.
Yeah. You can always take it off again.
Yeah, mum. Anyway.
Yeah. It must be interesting, the people that you come across and the questions you get asked from all the different workshops and like expos and trade shows that you visit. You must kind of get some questions come out of left field that kind of catch you off guard a little bit. And
yeah, I had one guy one time. It was at some expo in the US, and I'm doing the configuration spiel and discussing bits and bobs, and then after when people start milling around and doing their thing, and this long lanky guy comes up in a big floppy hat and a sort of caftan type thing or poncho or whatever, and there's certainly some alarm bells going off in my head at this point, and he's like, yeah dude, really, it's really interesting configuration and all that, but he goes, what about magic? And I'm like, Yeah. I check his name tag, and his name tag says Merlin. So I stepped away from that. I broke eye contact and walked away slowly. Because that's taken it to the next level. So we have configuration, compatibility, and magic. You can't go wrong.
How bizarre.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. Yeah, we could rig the tree, or we could just make it disapparate.
We get our wand out. Did you avoid him for the? I bet you kind
Yeah,
of saw him floating around for the rest of the
yeah. He
day.
just took off on his broomstick, and he was never seen again. It's only intriguing. Hey, my theory about arborists is, misfits or hyperactives or both. So you get to choose.
Yeah, there's certainly some characters. Certainly
Yes.
some characters. Yeah. All right, I won't take up any more of your time, Mark. We've been chatting for a while. So
Good. No, good talking to you. Thanks,
um,
Dan. Thanks
yeah,
for being
no.
patient with me.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it and love to hear more, you know, from the man behind the products that everybody pretty much uses here and there. So
Well, and
yeah, so
just
I imagine everybody that's listening is would like to thank you and Chris and Bedis for bringing some of those products to market, and obviously bringing the knowledge and the information to the workshops you do. And it takes people like yourself to kind of evolve the industry. And I mean, there are other people out there that are are doing similar things, and we kind of need more people that can bring ideas and share experience and stories and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, no,
yeah, yeah,
thank you, Dan. I think at the end of the day, as I say, this isn't unique. It's not rocket science. These are always collective efforts. And then again, it takes people to out there to buy the tools, to use the tools. It takes replicators, people like yourself who spread the word. I think I see it as a tapestry or a mosaic that the more we can contribute our personal skills, the richer and the deeper it becomes. And with that, I just hope that we were able to contribute a thread towards that tapestry or a couple of stones towards that mosaic. And if we manage to do that, I'm happy.
well, yeah, I think I've certainly succeeded in that one. So
Thank you, Dan.
yeah, yeah. I know. I just like to say actually, you did mention it briefly earlier when we were talking about like products and patents and stuff, but the lower D's on the Treemotion is one of my favorite things. Yeah, I mean, just obviously in harnesses, but just in the equipment that we use, having the option to use those lower Ds and not have the kind of stress that using the side Ds would put on your back, and having kind of spread the weight around. And whoever came up with that one, or if it was a collaboration, that was yeah, that's an awesome design feature. So
Thank you, Dan.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Again, I think going back, I think that's something. I think we got a lot of things right. I think working on the Evo now was an opportunity to revisit that front hardware and tweak some things based on what we learned from the first iteration of that piece of hardware. But yes, certainly I think that was one of the big step changes from what harnesses were before the tree. I think there's a before and after Treemotion in regards to that connecting element between upper and lower assembly of the
yeah.
harness.
Actually, that brings me to one more thing that you just mentioned there about the front points on the Evo. I saw a post that Teufelberger put out, kind of almost um, giving the what am I trying to say? They shared a post with the lower Ds with like a question mark about a different configuration option. Is that something that might be coming out, or like a different use for them, or was that just an image to kind of get people thinking about what it could be?
It could have been clickbait. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about. I didn't see that post. I think what we tried to incorporate. I think we try to make the things as future-proof as possible. So if we can create a platform that we can build on as time goes by, I think that's interesting. I think it also offers value to the end user in the sense that they can continue to upgrade the equipment as time goes by. So yeah, certainly it is something you consider as part of the design process. At this point in time, the dog bone for the stitch terminations and the knot stopper is the two offerings that we have at this point in time. Could it evolve in future? Yeah, conceivably yes, but that's where we're at today.
Awesome. All right. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Great chatting with you. Yeah, and if you're, are you heading over to the States or Canada this year?
Yeah, there's a couple more trips planned. Doing the Arborfest end of March in North Carolina, and then doing some more work in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. And then there's some early discussion about doing something your way in summer. See where that goes.
Nice. Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. Hopefully, get to catch up with you and see one of your presentations, or come to a workshop or something. That'd be awesome.
Or just hang out.
Yeah, just hang out. Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, no pressure. Just chat.
Good. Sweet, Dan.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks very much. Thanks very much for joining me. Awesome.
Cheers.
So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening, and a really big thank you to Mark Bridge for coming on and giving up his evening to join me for a chat on the podcast. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I certainly did. I certainly enjoyed getting a little more of an insight into Mark Bridge, the person and the arborist. So thank you very much for that, Mark. I'd just like to give you a little reminder about one of the documents that Mark mentioned in the podcast, which was the HSE rigging research. So if you just type that into Google, and you'll be able to find the article, no problem, or the document, should I say. It's a huge document. As Mark said, it's about 400 pages, so it's a little bit of bedtime reading there. So yeah, take a look at that, download the document, and I'm sure everybody will find some use in that. So thanks again, Mark. Great having you on the podcast, and hopefully we'll get to do it again sometime. Just want to say before we finish, this podcast again was sponsored by Wesper Tree Equipment. So I'd like to say a big thank you to them. So Wesper Tree Equipment, you can get 10% off your first order using the URL wesper.com/pod and use the promo code POD, POD. So wesper.com/pod with the promo code at checkout, POD. Thanks very much for listening to the Climbing Arborist podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.